After a mysterious virus wipes out humanity, Philip Miller is the last man on Earth. For the past year, he's been traveling across America, searching for survivors, making announcements in deserted cities, and taking art and artifacts from museums. After his mission to find survivors fails, Philip returns to his hometown, Tucson. In a final attempt, he writes, "Alive in Tucson," on every billboard he can find. He then heads to his rundown apartment, packs his things, and moves to a gated community in the city's wealthier area. Philip picks the largest house and makes it his new home, filling it with priceless items like famous paintings, a White House rug, a dinosaur skull, Academy Awards, and more. Each night before bed, he apologizes to God for his excessive masturbation and hopes to see a woman's face before he dies. Luckily, there are plenty of cars for Philip to drive around. He goes to a grocery store in his underwear, breaking in with a gun. In just a year, he's completely lost his sense of decency. With no one left to impress, he acts on every impulse, like smashing cans in the store and bringing home hundreds of adult films. To pass the time, Philip plays racquetball alone, uses lamps and aquariums as bowling pins, and crashes cars for fun.
Oh, yes!
The chaos gives him a bit of adrenaline and helps ease his loneliness. After a month, he starts to lose his grip on reality, and being alone on his birthday makes him reflect on everything he took for granted when life was normal. Philip misses his mother, his old life, and people in general. A few months later, the mansion he once called home is now a dump, cluttered with plastic and cans he never bothers to clean. He hasn't showered in days and is starting to live like an animal. With no running water and a toilet buried under plastic bottles, Philip cuts a hole in the diving board and uses the pool as his bathroom. He also fills a kiddie pool with margaritas, bathing in it while drinking straight from it. One day, Philip goes to a bar, draws faces on balls, and gives them names and personalities to cope with his loneliness. At night, he takes a ball named Gary to a clothing store and flirts with a mannequin he's infatuated with. When her arm breaks, he completely loses it. Ready to end it all, Philip drives to a nearby hill, bidding farewell to his ball friends and promising to remember them forever. As he speeds toward the edge, he spots smoke in the distance and slams the brakes just in time. Philip can hardly believe his eyes. He follows the smoke to a trailer where he discovers someone living there. Then he sees something he's been longing for all year, a bra hanging out to dry. Overcome with emotion, he smells it and faints. When Philip wakes up, he finds a beautiful girl holding his head in her lap. She promises to fulfill his wishes and kisses him. He enjoys the kiss until he realizes he's dreaming. The woman in front of him is older and less attractive.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I was doing mouth to mouth.
Performing CPR to revive him. They pull away, both awkwardly surprised to see another person after so long. Philip asks about the beautiful woman, but she points out he should be more concerned about his wet underpants. Turns out he peed himself while unconscious. Even in this moment, Philip insists he was swimming earlier, which is why his underpants are wet. Philip aggressively denies peeing himself, causing the girl to panic. She pulls out a gun, warning him to stay back. Finally embarrassed, Philip admits he did pee. Once they both calm down, they introduce themselves. Her name is Carol, and she was an analyst before the virus. She's been wandering America ever since everyone else died. Carol saw the Alive in Tucson sign and came to see if she was the last person alive. Though Philip has longed to meet a woman, he's not thrilled to see Carol. She keeps correcting his grammar, doesn't get his jokes, and talks about random things. After a while, they decide to drive to the grocery store. On the way, Carol complains about Philip ignoring a stop sign. Even though he argues there's no traffic, she insists they must follow the rules or they'll end up living like animals. To calm her down, he stops, checks both sides, and reassures her that no one is coming. Carol's nagging continues when they reach the grocery store and Philip parks in a handicapped spot. They argue for the 5th time that day, with Philip claiming the imaginary handicapped person has plenty of space. When Carol insists he park elsewhere, Philip drives the car straight into the store. Carol takes a tour of Philip's house and is horrified by how he lives. One pool is filled with feces, the other with garbage. She accuses him of stealing the paintings, but he argues that no one owns them anymore. By the end of the tour, Philip asks her to return to her campsite. The next morning, Carol wakes Philip up as she cleans his house. She nags him to get gardening and cleaning supplies from the store so they can start living like humans. That night, Philip vents to his ball buddies about Carol. Though he's only known her for a day, he feels like they're a married couple in desperate need of a divorce. The next morning, things get worse when Carol moves into the house next door. Philip tries to get rid of her, but she stubbornly refuses to leave. She asks if he's afraid of being seen naked, and in response, he takes off his pants. Carol then brings up the obvious issue, reproduction. Carol believes they are the chosen ones, tasked with repopulating the earth. Philip insists he wouldn't sleep with her, even if she were the last woman on Earth, which in this case she is. Later, while he's using his outdoor toilet, Carol approaches and asks him to figure out how to get running water to their house. Carol wants running water so they can grow tomatoes and other fruits. When Philip refuses to help, she tries to bribe him with fresh tomatoes, but he's uninterested. She should know better than to bribe someone who poops off a diving board. However, when it gets dark, he sneaks into her garden and eats all her vegetables. The next morning, Carol knocks on Philip's door and finds him covered in leftover tomatoes. He still denies stealing them. She also mentions hurting her leg while trying to transfer water from a manhole. A few days later, she gives up on trying to live like a decent human. Philip finds Carol making an outdoor toilet in a fountain, mimicking his swimming pool toilet. She wonders if they're not the chosen ones, but the forgotten ones, with no purpose in life. She feels they're incapable of rebuilding civilization when they can't even set up a proper toilet in their million-dollar mansions. Philip, who's used to seeing Carol as optimistic, feels bad for her. So he arranges a way to water her garden using the city's water tank. Carol is finally happy to see his good side and invites him to dinner. That night, Philip enjoys an organic meal, and after a while, the topic of sex comes up. He tells her he's now ready to sleep with her. To Philip's surprise, Carol says she doesn't want to make love before marriage. He laughs, thinking it's a joke, but she's serious. Though the idea seems ridiculous, he agrees to propose to make her feel better. They decide to get married the next day, and in the following scene, they're at church saying their vows. Philip thinks the wedding isn't necessary but goes along with it. When they step out of the church, they're greeted by a crowd of guests. Realizing his mistake, Philip screams. He then wakes up in his bed, relieved it was just a dream. He even checks the window to make sure most of the world is still dead. Later, Carol shows up at Philip's house with food. She suggests they elect the President of the United States by voting. Though it's pointless, Philip elects himself and becomes president unanimously. The two then enjoy spaghetti and raisin balls, which Carol considers a good substitute for meatballs. The day of the wedding arrives. Carol prepares the decorations and cake while Philip is supposed to get the rings. Instead, he throws a bachelorette party for his ball buddies, setting random things on fire in a parking lot. He even goes to say goodbye to the mannequin, telling her she will always be the love of his life. At the end of the day, Philip goes to the church where Carol has prepared a recording to officiate their wedding. After exchanging brief vows, it's time for the rings, only for Carol to realize Philip didn't get them. She realizes she's the only one putting in effort and calls off the wedding. Later, Philip knocks on Carol's door to talk, but she doesn't answer. He ends up breaking down the door with a hammer and enters. To his surprise, she's been decorating the house and has even made a cake with his statue on top. Feeling guilty for what he did, Philip apologizes to her. Philip admits that he doesn't like her personality or the food she cooks, but he's grateful she exists because without her, he wouldn't be alive. He then takes her out for something special. In the next scene, they visit a jewelry shop where Carol picks out all the rings she wants. They finally get married and are declared husband and wife. That night, they make love, but it's not what Philip expected. Carol talks nonstop, making odd comments she thinks are sexy. The next morning, she finds him playing racquetball at home. Philip expects Carol to nag him again, but to his surprise, she joins in the game. They spend the rest of the day doing things Philip usually does, making fireproof suits and setting each other on fire, running a bulldozer over beer cans, and visiting Philip's ex-girlfriend, a mannequin. Carol talks to the mannequin for a bit before beating it up for hitting on her husband. For the first time, Philip is glad he married her and thinks their life might be tolerable. On the way home, they suddenly crash into a limo at an intersection. Shocked, Philip rushes to the car and sees a beautiful woman step out. Just when Philip thinks he's happy with his wife, he begins to regret their marriage. To find out what happens next, stay tuned for the second part. If you enjoyed this recap, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a like to show your support. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.